The snow fell harder than Elise had ever seen before. Thick flakes swirled around her car, blurring the narrow mountain road into nothing more than a white haze. She gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles pale, as the wind howled against the glass. It was supposed to be a simple trip, just a quiet weekend away in the mountains to escape the city noise. A cozy chalet her friend had recommended, with a view over the forest and a fireplace that promised warmth. But the storm had come faster than the forecasts predicted. The tires slipped once, twice, before she finally gave up the fight. She pulled the car onto a small side path and let it idle. Panic threatened to rise in her chest. No signal. No lights. Only endless snow pressing in on all sides. Then she saw it. A dim glow through the trees, almost swallowed by the storm. Elise hesitated. Walking out there in this weather wasn't safe. But staying in the car all night with the wind rattling the frame felt even worse. She pulled her coat tighter and stepped into the storm. Each gust bit into her skin, every crunch of her boots swallowed by the endless hiss of falling snow. The glow grew stronger until finally, a shape emerged, a chalet, its windows glowing amber against the night. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, promising fire, warmth, maybe safety. She knocked once, her hands trembling from the cold. For a moment, she thought no one would answer. Then the door opened. He stood there. Tall, broad-shouldered, his hair damp from the snow as though he had just returned from outside himself. His eyes swept over her quickly, assessing, cautious. But there was no mistaking the strength in his presence. "You shouldn't be out in this storm," he said, his voice deep, carrying the kind of authority that left no room for argument. Elise's breath caught, half from the cold, half from something else she didn't dare name. "My car, it couldn't make it? I didn't know where else to go." He stepped aside, his movements controlled, deliberate. "Get in before you freeze." Warmth wrapped around her the moment she crossed the threshold. A roaring fire crackled in the stone hearth. The scent of wood smoke and pine filled the air. She pulled back her hood, snowflakes melting into her hair, and finally allowed herself a shaky breath. He closed the door behind her with a heavy thud, shutting out the storm. "You're lucky you found this place," he said, watching her closely. "Cabins are few this far up." She nodded, trying not to stare, though it was impossible not to. His flannel shirt stretched across his chest, sleeves rolled up to his forearms, a trace of snow still dusting his beard. He looked like someone born to this wild place, solid, grounded, untouchable. "I didn't mean to intrude," she said softly. His lips curved, not quite a smile, but something close. "Storm doesn't leave much room for choice." He gestured toward the fire. "Warm yourself. I'll get you something hot to drink." Elise moved closer to the hearth, holding her hands out to the flames. Her body trembled, partly from the cold that still clung to her skin, partly from the awareness of him moving in the kitchen behind her. Every sound, the clink of a mug, the low rumble of his voice as he muttered to himself, settled into her with an intensity she couldn't ignore. When he returned, he handed her a steaming cup. Their fingers brushed, just for a second, and warmth flared stronger than the fire itself. "Thank you," she whispered. He studied her again, those storm-gray eyes seeing more than she wanted to reveal. "You're safe here," he said finally. "But until the storm clears, this place is the world. Just you, me, and the snow." Elise's heart beat faster. The storm outside roared on, but inside the chalet, another kind of storm was already building, one she wasn't sure she could resist. The storm outside grew louder, hammering the roof with sheets of snow, but the crackle of the fire filled the silence between them. Elise sat curled on the rug, cradling the mug he had given her. The warmth seeped into her palms, slowly spreading through her chilled body. He moved with quiet ease, as if the storm didn't touch him, as if he had known winters far harsher than this one. He set another log on the fire, sparks leaping into the chimney, then turned to her. "You should dry those clothes before you catch a fever," he said. Elise blinked. She was still in her damp coat and jeans, the cold clinging stubbornly to her skin. She hesitated, biting her lip. "I didn't exactly pack for staying here." One brow lifted, just slightly. "There's spare flannel in the bedroom closet. Won't be a perfect fit, but better than freezing." His matter-of-fact tone eased her nerves a little, though something about the offer carried a weight that made her pulse quicken. She nodded, setting the mug down. "Thank you. I'll change." The bedroom was small but warm, the quilt on the bed handmade, patterned in deep reds and greens. She found the flannel where he said it would be soft from wear, carrying the faint scent of pine and smoke. She slipped it on, the hem brushing her thighs, far too long but somehow comforting. When she stepped back into the main room, his eyes flickered toward her just once. The look was brief, unreadable, but it sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the fire. "You look warmer," he said simply. Elise tugged the sleeves over her hands, smiling faintly. "Much." They settled near the hearth again, the fire painting gold across the walls. For a while, neither spoke. She listened to the wind shrieking outside, imagining the snow piling higher, cutting off roads, burying her little car. The thought should have frightened her, but here, inside this cabin with him, she felt something else entirely, an odd sense of safety, laced with anticipation she couldn't name. Finally, curiosity broke her silence. "Do you live here all year?" His gaze remained steady on the fire. "Most of it." "Doesn't it get lonely?" For a moment, his jaw tightened. Then he answered, voice low. "Solitude's a choice. Sometimes better than company you can't trust." There was a shadow behind those words, one she wanted to chase, but didn't. She only nodded, sipping her drink. "I can't imagine it. I'm always surrounded by people. The city never sleeps." "That's why you came out here?" he asked, finally turning his eyes on her. Her breath caught under the weight of his gaze. "Yes. I wanted quiet. Just a few days. I didn't expect," she gestured toward the storm beating against the windows. His lips curved in that almost smile again. "The mountain has its own rules." Another log snapped, sparks jumping, and Elise shifted closer to the fire. She was aware of him, too aware the way his presence filled the space, calm but powerful, as though the cabin itself bent around him. "I didn't even ask your name," she said softly. "Daniel," he replied. "And you?" "Elise." He nodded once, then leaned back in the armchair, his broad frame outlined by firelight. "Well, Elise. Looks like fate decided you'd be snowbound here tonight." Her pulse quickened. The word fate lingered in the air, heavy and dangerous. She laughed nervously, brushing hair from her face. "I guess I should be thankful I found the one warm cabin out here." "Not luck," Daniel said quietly, eyes never leaving hers. "Instinct. You followed the light." The way he said it made her shiver, not with cold, but with something deeper. Instinct. As if her being here wasn't an accident at all. The hours passed slowly. Daniel moved easily between silence and short, deliberate words. He wasn't a man who spoke without purpose. Elise found herself watching him more than she should have, the way his hands were steady when he handled the fire, the way his voice resonated low in his chest. At one point, the storm outside thundered so loudly that she startled. The mug almost slipped from her fingers. Before she could catch it, Daniel was already there, his hand steadying hers. The touch was brief, but it sent a jolt straight through her. His hand was warm, strong, and when their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them, something neither of them dared to name. Elise swallowed hard, pulling her hand back, but the space between them felt different now. The storm raged on, trapping them together. And though the fire kept her warm, Elise knew it was Daniel, the stranger with storm-gray eyes, who made the night burn hotter than the flames. The night dragged on with no sign of the storm easing. Snow pounded the windows so hard it blurred the world into nothing but white. The little chalet seemed to shrink under the weight of the storm, its walls groaning softly as though the mountain itself pressed down on them. Elise sat near the fire, knees pulled up, Daniel's oversized flannel draped around her. The flames painted shadows that danced across the wooden beams, and every now and then, she caught herself glancing at Daniel in the armchair opposite. He had closed his eyes, head tilted back, but she could tell he wasn't sleeping. His shoulders were too tense, his jaw too tight. Even in rest, he carried an edge, like a man who never fully lowered his guard. "Do you always stay here alone?" she asked suddenly, her voice breaking the hush of the cabin. Daniel opened his eyes slowly. His gaze caught hers, unreadable. "Most winters, yes." She tilted her head. "That doesn't bother you?" A small silence followed. The fire cracked, filling the gap, before he answered. "Silence can be a comfort. It doesn't lie." Elise frowned slightly. "That sounds lonely." He studied her for a moment, as though weighing her words. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and the firelight carved sharp lines into his face. "Maybe. But sometimes loneliness is safer than trusting the wrong person." His tone carried something raw, something Elise couldn't ignore. She wanted to ask more, but the heaviness in his eyes stopped her. Instead, she nodded, curling deeper into the warmth of the fire. The storm shrieked, rattling the window panes. Elise shivered despite the heat. "It feels like the world's gone," she whispered. "Like it's just us left." Daniel's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. "Maybe that's not the worst thing." The words hung in the air, heavier than the storm itself. Elise's heart thudded, and she looked away quickly, focusing on the fire. Yet she could still feel his eyes on her, steady and unrelenting. A log collapsed in the hearth, sending sparks into the chimney. Elise jumped slightly, and Daniel stood, crossing to tend the fire. His movements were sure, practiced. He crouched low, feeding the flames, and Elise couldn't help watching the way the light traced across his shoulders, the strength in his hands as he adjusted the logs. When he straightened, his eyes caught hers. For a moment, neither of them moved. Elise forced herself to break the silence. "You're good at this. It feels like you've been living with storms your whole life." He gave a short laugh, low and rough. "Maybe I have." Elise smiled faintly, but her chest tightened. The fire wasn't the only thing sparking between them now. He sat back down, but this time, not in the armchair. He lowered himself onto the rug beside her, the heat of his body a new warmth that the fire couldn't match. Elise's breath hitched at the closeness. "You're nervous," Daniel said quietly. Her eyes widened. I'm not. The corner of his mouth lifted. You are. Your hands are trembling. She looked down quickly, realizing he was right. She curled her fingers into the fabric of his flannel. It's just, the storm. His eyes didn't waver. Is it? The question lingered, daring her to answer. Elisa's cheeks burned, but she couldn't speak. The air between them grew heavy, charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. Daniel leaned back slightly, giving her space, but his gaze stayed locked on her. Don't worry. You're safe here. His words should have soothed her. Instead, they sent another shiver down her spine. Because safety was the last thing she felt. What she felt was dangerous. Magnetic. The fire crackled, and Elise let out a shaky laugh, trying to break the spell. This isn't exactly how I planned my weekend getaway. Daniel's expression softened. Life rarely asks what we planned. He paused, then added, sometimes it gives us what we need instead. Elisa's breath caught. Need. The word echoed inside her, stirring something she hadn't wanted to admit since the moment she saw him standing in the doorway. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They only sat there, two strangers caught in a storm, shadows flickering around them, sparks flying from more than just the fire. When Elise finally dared to glance at him again, she realized something that sent her pulse racing. He wasn't just watching her. He was waiting. The storm hadn't let up. If anything, it seemed fiercer now, pressing against the chalet with a relentless roar. The windows were half buried in snow, the world outside erased completely. Elise stood by one of them, peering out into the swirling white, though there was nothing to see. It's like being sealed inside a snow globe, she murmured. Daniel's voice came from behind her, low and steady. And no one's shaking it but the mountain. She turned, finding him leaning casually against the doorframe that led to the kitchen. He had shed his boots and rolled up his sleeves again, looking as though he belonged to the cabin as much as the fire did. The shadows of the flames flickered across his face, sharpening the strong lines of his jaw. Doesn't it ever scare you? Elise asked. Being cut off like this? Daniel shook his head. Fear's a choice. The mountain only takes what you don't respect. His calm made her heart beat faster. There was something unshakable about him, something Elise both admired and found dangerous. She moved back toward the fire, hugging the borrowed flannel around herself. I don't think I'd survive out here alone. Daniel's eyes followed her. You underestimate yourself. The simple statement caught her off guard. You don't even know me. I know enough. His voice softened, almost like a confession. You walked through a storm most people wouldn't have dared. You trusted your instincts. That's not weakness. Elisa's throat tightened. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe she was more than the fragile city girl she felt like in this wild place. She sank onto the rug again, closer to the fire. Daniel joined her after a moment, sitting so near that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. For a while, they just listened to the storm's howl and the fire's crackle, the silence between them thick with something unsaid. Finally, Elise spoke, her voice barely above the flames. You talk like someone who's been hurt. Daniel didn't look at her right away. His gaze stayed on the fire, his profile hard in the glow. Everyone's been hurt. That's not what I meant. He turned then, eyes locking onto hers. There was no hostility there, only a rawness she hadn't seen before. You're right, he admitted quietly. I've trusted people who didn't deserve it. I learned the cost. Elise's chest ached at the weight in his words. She wanted to reach out, to close the space between them, but she stopped herself. Still, the urge lingered, pressing against her ribs. I'm sorry, she whispered. Daniel studied her, as though measuring the sincerity in her voice. Then, slowly, he nodded. You don't need to be. You didn't put the scars there. The fire popped, breaking the heavy moment, but the charge between them didn't fade. Elise tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her fingers trembling. You make it sound like trusting anyone again is impossible. His gaze dropped briefly to her hands, then rose back to her eyes. Not impossible, he said softly. Just dangerous. Her breath caught. Dangerous. The word curved between them like a spark, igniting everything she was trying to hold back. The silence stretched, heavy and alive. Elise could feel her pulse in her throat, in her fingertips. The closeness, the warmth, the storm, it all blurred together, leaving only him. Daniel shifted slightly, leaning closer, his voice dropping so low she almost didn't hear it. Tell me, Elise, are you afraid of danger? Her lips parted, but no sound came out at first. She swallowed hard, the firelight flickering in her eyes. I don't know, she whispered. Maybe not tonight. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. The storm wailed outside, demanding their attention, but neither of them moved. Daniel's hand lifted, slow, deliberate. He didn't touch her, just hovered close enough that the heat of his palm brushed her cheek. His eyes searched hers, waiting, always waiting. Elise's heart hammered. She could have pulled away. She could have leaned in. Instead, she stayed frozen in the space between choice and surrender, her breath trembling in the air. For the first time, Daniel's careful control cracked just enough for his voice to betray something deeper. You should sleep. It'll be worse by morning. The distance returned with those words, but the echo of the almost touch lingered like fire against her skin. Elise curled into the quilt he handed her, but long after she closed her eyes, she felt the storm inside her burn hotter than the one outside. Elise tried to sleep. She lay curled on the couch beneath the thick quilt Daniel had given her, the firelight glowing faintly across the wooden ceiling beams. But no matter how tightly she closed her eyes, the storm would not let her drift off. The wind rattled the shutters, snow thudded heavily against the roof, and the cabin groaned like an old ship in rough waters. Her body was warm, yet restless. Each howl of the wind stirred something inside her, a reminder that the world outside was merciless, and only this fragile space kept them safe. She turned on her side, glancing across the room. Daniel sat in the armchair still, one elbow on the armrest, his chin resting on his hand. His eyes were half closed, but Elise knew he wasn't asleep either. His watchfulness was too sharp, his stillness too deliberate. Are you always like this? She asked suddenly, her voice breaking the quiet. Daniel's eyes opened fully, glinting in the firelight. Like what? On guard. Even now, when it's just you and me and the storm. He regarded her for a long moment before answering. Old habits. Elise pushed herself up on one elbow, the quilt sliding from her shoulder. Habits from what? His gaze held hers, unflinching. From a life that taught me to never be caught unprepared. There was weight in those words, the kind that came from experience, not theory. Elise wanted to press him, to peel away the layers he kept hidden. But the look in his eyes stopped her. It was not a wall, but a warning. She softened her voice. And now? Do you think you're in danger here? For the first time, something like a smile flickered across his lips. Danger comes in many forms. Her heart thudded, and she couldn't look away. The meaning in his words was clear enough, even if he didn't say it aloud. The fire shifted, shadows dancing across the walls. Elise lay back, staring at the ceiling, but every nerve in her body was alive with his presence. The air in the room was thick with the storm outside and something far more dangerous within. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Sleep hovered just out of reach. Finally, Elise pushed the quilt aside and sat up. "I can't do it," she admitted. "I can't sleep with that storm howling like it wants to tear this place apart." Daniel studied her quietly, then stood. "Come here." Her breath caught, but she rose, her bare feet brushing against the rug as she stepped toward him. He didn't move until she was close enough to feel the heat radiating from him. Then he gestured toward the fire. "Sit," he said softly. She sank onto the rug, the flames warming her face. Daniel crouched beside her, feeding the fire another log. When he leaned back, he didn't retreat to his armchair. Instead, he stayed, sitting next to her on the floor. The closeness was dizzying. Elise could feel the tension like a live wire between them, every small movement magnified. She folded her hands in her lap to steady herself. Daniel's voice came low, almost thoughtful. "You asked if I was afraid earlier. Truth is, storms don't scare me. People do." Elise turned her head, startled. "People. People lie. People betray. A storm, at least it's honest. You see it coming." Her chest ached at the rawness of his words. Without thinking, she reached out, her fingers brushing his sleeve. "Not everyone's like that." His eyes dropped to her hand, then back to her face. "Aren't they?" The challenge in his voice sent a shiver through her. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let her touch linger, a quiet defiance. "I'm not." The silence that followed was heavy, alive. Daniel's jaw tightened, his control visibly tested. His hand lifted, hovering as if caught between restraint and surrender. Then, slowly, he placed it over hers. The warmth of his touch was startling, steady, grounding. Yet beneath it, Elise felt the storm inside him, the same one raging within herself. Their eyes locked, neither of them looking away. The fire snapped, the storm wailed, but in that moment, the cabin's small world contained only two people, two strangers pulled together by chance, or perhaps by something neither wanted to name. Daniel's thumb brushed against her knuckles, deliberate, slow. Elise's breath hitched. The smallest touch carried the weight of everything unspoken between them. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, unsteady in a way she had never heard before. "You should sleep here. By the fire. I'll keep watch." Elise wanted to protest, wanted to argue that she didn't need protecting. But instead, she nodded, her voice trembling. "Only if you stay too." He held her gaze for a long, silent moment, then inclined his head once. "Then we'll face the storm together." And so they sat there, side by side on the rug, the storm clawing at the chalet. Elise's eyes grew heavy at last, but her hand remained in his, unwilling to let go even as sleep claimed her. When Elise woke, the fire had burned low, only glowing embers left in the hearth. The storm still roared outside, though softer than before, as if the mountain was beginning to tire of its own fury. She blinked against the dim light and realized her hand was still in Daniel's. He sat beside her, unmoving, as though he had not slept at all. His head rested back against the arm of the couch, his broad shoulders tense even in rest. For a moment, Elise only watched him. In sleep, or something close to it, the hardness in his expression eased. She saw lines of weariness she hadn't noticed before, shadows of battles fought far away from this cabin. Carefully, she shifted, but his hand tightened instinctively, holding hers in place. Her breath caught. He opened his eyes slowly, storm gray meeting hers in the dim glow. "You stayed," she whispered. "I said I would." His voice was low, husky from hours of silence. Something in her chest swelled. She had been alone in many ways, even back in the city surrounded by people. But here, in this storm with a man she had known less than a day, she felt less alone than she had in years. "Thank you," she murmured. Daniel studied her for a moment, then released her hand at last. He pushed himself to his feet, stretching his stiff shoulders. "Storm's easing. Might be able to dig you out tomorrow." The words struck Elise harder than she expected. Tomorrow. That meant leaving. Leaving the fire, the safety, the strange bond that had formed in the eye of the storm. Leaving him. She pulled the quilt tighter around her, her voice soft. "Do you want me to leave?" Daniel paused, his back to her. His hand rested on the mantel as though he needed the wood beneath his palm to steady himself. "Want has nothing to do with it," he said finally. Elise frowned. "Then what does?" He turned then, his eyes unreadable. Reality. The distance in his tone hurt more than she wanted to admit. She stood, crossing the small space until she was only a breath away from him. "Reality is that we're here, together, in this cabin. Right now, nothing else matters." Her words hung between them, daring him to argue. Daniel's jaw tightened. His hand twitched at his side, as if fighting the urge to reach for her. "You don't know what you're saying, Elise." "Then explain it to me," she pressed, her voice trembling but steady with resolve. For the first time, his control faltered. His eyes blazed, storm meeting fire. "You don't understand the risk." Her pulse thundered. "Maybe I don't care." The silence that followed was sharp, electric. Daniel's chest rose and fell, his breath uneven, and Elise felt the storm between them break open. He moved before she could think, his hand rising to cup her cheek. The warmth of his palm burned against her skin, his touch both fierce and gentle. Elise's eyes fluttered shut, her breath catching as the space between them vanished. But he stopped, their foreheads almost touching, his voice a rasp. "This is a mistake." Her lips parted, her whisper trembling in the air. "Then let's make it together." The fire crackled, the storm hissed, but none of it mattered. The tension that had stretched between them since the moment she stepped through his door snapped like a taut cord. Daniel's thumb brushed her cheekbone, his touch unbearably tender for a man built of steel and storms. He leaned closer, and Elise's heart raced so wildly she thought it might break free of her chest. But just before the final step, he pulled back, his jaw clenched tight. "Not yet." Frustration and longing twisted inside her. "Why?" "Because once that line is crossed, there's no going back." Elise met his gaze, her voice fierce despite the tremor in it. "Maybe I don't want to go back." The raw honesty in her words hung between them. Daniel's hand lingered on her cheek, his thumb still stroking absent-mindedly, as though he couldn't bear to let go. Finally, he dropped his hand, stepping back, but his eyes never left hers. "Sleep while you can. Tomorrow changes everything." Elise sank back onto the couch, but there was no sleep left in her. Her skin still burned from his touch, her heart thundered with the storm he had left raging inside her. Outside, the snow began to ease. But inside the chalet, the blizzard had only just begun. By morning, the world had transformed. The storm had passed, leaving the chalet wrapped in a heavy, unbroken silence. Snow blanketed the forest in endless white, glittering under a pale sun. Elise stood at the window, her breath fogging the glass. Her car was buried, little more than a hump beneath the drifts. The road beyond was gone, swallowed by the mountain. Daniel came up behind her, his presence as steady and unyielding as the mountain itself. "It'll take hours to dig you out," he said. "Maybe more." Elise didn't turn. She let her fingers trace the frost on the glass. "So I'm trapped here another night." His voice was quiet. "Yes." Relief flickered through her, sharp, undeniable. Another night meant more time. More chances to cross the line they had both been dancing around. Yet fear whispered too, reminding her that when the road cleared, this fragile, impossible world would vanish. She turned then, meeting his eyes. "And after that? When the road's clear?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "You'll go back. To your life. To the city. And you'll stay here," she said softly. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Silence filled the space between them, heavy with the truth neither wanted to admit. Elise stepped closer, her voice trembling but steady. "Do you want me to go back?" His eyes darkened, the storm within him breaking free. "Want has nothing to do with it." "Yes, it does," she whispered. Daniel's control cracked. He moved suddenly, closing the distance, his hands finding her waist, pulling her closer than he had allowed before. Elise's breath caught, her heart hammering, but she didn't resist. She couldn't. "You should be careful what you ask for," he said, his voice rough, torn between warning and surrender. "Maybe I don't want careful," she whispered back. "Not with you." The tension that had burned between them for 2 endless nights finally shattered. Daniel's mouth claimed hers in a kiss that was fierce and consuming, as if the storm had been waiting inside them both, only to break free now. Elise melted into him, her hands clutching at his shirt, every nerve alive with heat. The world outside was gone, the snow, the silence, the mountain itself. All that remained was him. When he finally broke away, his breath came ragged, his forehead resting against hers. "This changes everything," he murmured. "Good," she breathed, her voice shaking with certainty. "Let it." They stood there, tangled in each other, the fire behind them crackling softly, the morning light spilling through the frosted window. Elise knew reality would come soon, the road would clear, choices would have to be made. But for now, in this fragile, snowbound world, there was only one truth: they had stopped fighting what was always inevitable. Daniel pressed another kiss to her temple, softer this time, almost reverent. "You have a life waiting for you." "And maybe," Elise whispered, tilting her face to meet his gaze, "my life is changing." For a long moment, he said nothing, only searched her eyes as though weighing the truth in them. Then, slowly, he nodded. The day stretched ahead, filled with the work of digging out and preparing to face the world beyond the cabin. But Elise no longer feared the storm, nor the silence that followed. She had faced both, and in doing so, had found something unexpected, something worth holding onto. As they stepped outside together, shovels in hand, the mountain air crisp against their skin, Elise glanced at Daniel. He met her look with the faintest of smiles, rare and real. And in that smile, she saw the answer she had been searching for all along. The storm had broken. But what it left behind was only the beginning.